Hello and welcome to the Hurling Show here Monday morning live. Myself and Michael Verney. We're here on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. Get your comments in. Let us know what you think about the weekend's action. We're back in Championship. We had 2 Leinster games, we had a Munster game, and we had a couple of other games going on down the different tiers, which we'll certainly touch on as well. It's good to be back, Michael Verney.
It's good to be back, and it's not like the winter last year, winter championship. It's a proper summer championship. We hurled with Burr yesterday morning just to show you what the weather is like. This is the difference between winter championship and summer championship. A good classic farmer's tan, and that was just got by wearing that was just got by wearing a jersey in a match yesterday morning when the sun was absolutely splitting the rocks. But it just shows you how different times are. Like, 5 or 6 months ago, or 6 or 7 months ago, it was a winter championship. It was, miserable days, dark evenings and everything. And now, we're in the height of summer. It's perfect conditions for hurling, as was seen over the weekend as well between hurling and football championship. Some right good games and prime conditions for it as well. It's exactly what we associate championship hurling with.
Did you get the farmer's tan on the legs as well, or did the tracksuit you were wearing during the game, did that cover that up?
I wasn't wearing a tracksuit actually, and I'm not gonna stand up to show anybody my legs either. But no, it was actually my first game back this year, and it was great. Just great to do a bit of hurling. It's amazing. Everyone talks about, the endorphins been released after, but you just do feel so much better after a game. Even if you don't play that well, sometimes it's just the fact that you're out running around like an idiot, and it's what you've been doing for the last 30 years. Yeah, loved it. Hopefully be able to stay injury free now for the next couple of months with a bit of luck.
Endorphins, what are they? Are they the oaks that swim around?
It could be something like that, yeah. They swim around your head.
Okay, we have a little bit of a poll running during the show here, and we'll touch back on it in a little while. So it's, can Liam Cahill turn around Waterford's fortunes this season after Sunday's defeat to Clare? So far, and we're only a few minutes in, yes, they have the talent is 54.3%, not good enough 28.6%, and too many absentees is 17.1%. So we'll touch back in a little bit of time. Also, just to remind you, if you do want to get this podcast on audio, the only way to get it is at Patreon. So patreon.com/OUrgame. It's €5 per month. Well worth it. You get all the football and all the hurling audio podcasts there, and plenty of other exclusive content as well. A good way to support the channel and join the Supporters Club. So what are your thoughts on that? Can Waterford recover? We'll go into it in more detail, but just kind of snap thoughts. They only had 7 of the All-Ireland team playing.
Got a tweet from Declan Heffernan last night. You were tagged in it as well. Heffernan's kind of sounds like a Tipperary name, so I'd say there's a bit of bitterness in the tweet. maybe I'm wrong, but he said at ML Verney at Shane saying, so who is the 3rd best team in Ireland? #hurling.
Well, this is the thing.
Yeah, to be fair, I didn't get time to go to the bakery this morning, but I have a big, huge slice of humble pie for breakfast after the show.
Anyone who saw the hurling power rankings that we did a week and a half ago, I had to fight like a dog to get Dublin ahead of Antrim in the rankings, and I think they put paid to that. And the same with, I wanted Tipperary ahead of Clare now, ahead of Waterford. Tipperary are ahead of Clare in the rankings now. Maybe we'll shake that up next week. But I think Waterford, your insistence on having them number 3 ahead of Tipperary, yeah, that must be the humblest of humble pie.
Yeah, no. To be fair, sometimes you'd be very tick over an opinion you had or whatever. But that's like, this is what championship hurling is all about. It's I wouldn't. Maybe it's not an upset, but it definitely was a surprise what Clare produced yesterday. It was a surprise to me anyway. I thought Waterford would be able to overcome the couple of setbacks that they had. But we're going to talk about it in detail now. But Clare brought, like, in talk about championship intensity, like, they brought something different to the table and something that we didn't see throughout the league. And that massive step up, it may only have been 2 weeks from the end of the league to the start of the championship, but the step up in gears that Clare went through, and they just left, and it's happened to you, I'm sure, in games, because it's definitely happened to me. When, I'm not saying that this was, the thought in, some of the Wexford lads or the Waterford lads' heads, but, when you think, you think you're going to win and you think you're in a really good place. And when you're thinking like that, sometimes you're left shell shocked, 10, 15 minutes into a game, and there's literally nothing you can do. You can try and turn things around, but your tongue is out. Lads, so many lads are struggling all over the field. It's so hard to turn it around. And they were kind of coming up against a defiant kind of a Clare team yesterday. Just weren't taking no for an answer. If they were to meet again, maybe it would be different. We know, not that there should have been complacency on the Waterford side, but it might be different. But Clare just brought something yesterday that Waterford were just not able to get up to at all. They didn't even really get close to them until the last few minutes. And that was more, just reading Vincent Hogan's piece in Independent this morning. What did he call it? He said it would have been grand larceny if Clare had lost that game with the 22 wides at the hit. And that's the way it was. They were by far the better team all over.
Yeah, they had enough chances to win 2 games here. But it comes back to the old Mike Tyson quote that everyone has a plan till they get punched in the mouth. And that's what happened to Waterford. From the start of this game, they were dreadful. Like, they were dead on their feet, and you kind of wondered, would they be able to muster any sort of a challenge as the game went on? Now, you do have to qualify it by saying they're down an awful lot of players. You take 7 or 8 players out of any team and you're in serious bother. Like Billy Nolan's goalkeeper and all the lads who came in and played for the Star lads I'm going to name. But, like, who can do without Stephen O'Keefe, Conor Prunty at 3, Tyke de Burka at 6, Jamie Barron at 8, maybe Pádraig Mahoney at 11.
It's funny when you say it there, Shane, and it's maybe something I hadn't thought about until you said it there. They were missing 1, 3, 6 and 8.
The point I was trying to make.
Yeah, they were missing, but like that's just like you're taking probably the 4 best hurlers when you put it. Prunty to me was huge. Prunty was as big, if not bigger, than Barron to be missing the other day, just because, like, I know Shannon did damage on him last year, but like he really went to town yesterday. He was so dangerous. And Prunty
until he got the ball, unfortunately. Like, I mean, Shanahan, brilliant at winning the ball, it just really did not happen for him in terms of his striking.
Yeah, he wasn't as good on the ball, but how dangerous he was, I suppose, and how well he was picked out in the positions he was able to find. Prunty, you'd imagine, would have been able to front up with him a bit more. He's been left one-on-one against some of the best forwards in the country and has been able to match up, but Waterford just weren't able to. Yeah, they never got motoring at all, really. It's mad.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a new player coming into a team, your chances of performing really well are heightened massively when you've got Tyke de Burka, Jamie Barron and Conor Prunty around you. Like, imagine if you're wing back there and you've got Tyke de Burka right beside you. If I make a mistake, he'll get on the ball. If I break it in front of me, Jamie Barron will get on the ball. If it goes on behind again, maybe Conor Prunty will get the ball. Unbelievably tough position to come in when you're a younger player. And I suppose it was borne out more so on the forward line because Stephen Bennett was the only starting forward to score from play for Waterford. Now, 4 of the guys that came on, they actually did quite well. And I wonder, will Liam Cahill said, you know what, I might turn to those guys the next day, depending on the draw they get. But I don't know if it's necessarily a case of swapping around the personnel. It kind of is, and he needs back those starting players that we mentioned, a couple of them at the very least.
Shane, I'd say there's nothing surer than Cahill at shuffle the deck. He sounded like a very deflated and disappointed man after yesterday. But I thought the language he used was really interesting. That he said so many Waterford players had failed. And I just thought that was really interesting language. And he said that, we had 11 guys training this morning on the extended panel. And he said, how can I look at them? Or they must be saying to me, they must be thinking in their head, like, what have I got to do to get in this squad when we look at how they performed yesterday. So I would be expecting them to shuffle the deck. I'd say the likes of Patrick Curran, if he's fit to play, would be coming in, and I'd say that the squad would be shuffled a good bit because that is just by far probably the worst performance under Cahill's reign for a big game, a meaningful game, a game that actually meant something. The fact that they just didn't show up is kind of hard to believe. And when you look at the age profile of a team being flat, it's just, they're not a team you would have associated with coming in with such a flat performance. They're not like a load of guys in their 30s or like that. They're guys that should be coming into their prime. Yeah,
and Cahill said afterwards, they conceded 13 goals in the league, so obviously there's a bit of a concern in the amount of chances they're giving up. But he said it is a concern. Those 22 wides tell a story. You're looking in at it and wondering why these Clare jerseys are getting pot shots at the goal and fellas 5, 10 and 15 yards away from him getting a hook or a block. It's just something that I'm not accustomed to with this group of players. And they were if you look at the half forward line, midfield, I mean, half back line certainly didn't take over either. With Clare's half forward line had their fill of it. David Reedy, I thought, was very good. Ryan Taylor, someone we've talked about in the past, he's often used in the full forward line. I thought he stepped up quite well in the half forward line. If Ian Galvin had his shooting boots on, I think he could have had a few more. There was a bit of a frustration watching Clare at times having shots from 100 yards, and Tony Kelly was obviously brilliant, scored 112, 5 of those from play, but had a lot of uncharacteristic wides as well. This would have caught up with them against opposition that were a little bit more tuned in. I'd be a little bit concerned for how Waterford set up also. We gave Liam Cahill massive credit last year, and rightly so. We gave them a lot of credit for how they beat up Tipperary in the second half of that league game a couple of weeks ago, and again, rightly so. But maybe that suggests that this was a Waterford team that was just about peaking for that game because they knew they were so close to championship, and maybe Tipperary were still training unbelievably hard. And that is something that we also speculated about. But the way his team played here, how flat they were, how they didn't seem to expect the short puck outs, or that Clare would just cede ground, drop back, allow the full back line to carry out the ball. And then what was their plan going to be? Because Clare just dropped back to the middle, so there was no short ball in around midfield. There was no hard runners coming off the shoulder of the likes of Shane Fives or whoever. I remember once himself or McNulty carried a ball out to around 30 yards out, 45, looked up, they had 2 men inside, but they couldn't hit them because John Conlon, Diarmuid Ryan and Paddy Fitzpatrick, they were kind of sitting back. They had no hard runners off the shoulder, and they'd just look and maybe hit a ball inside to half back, but they had nowhere to go. So it was all very static and statuesque. So is that down to Liam Cahill? Is it down to the players? Is it a bit of both? Whatever it is, it's very concerning. And people, get your comments in. There's plenty of comments already streaming in there.
I think a lot of it comes back to the player. I think a lot of it does come back to the players, Shane. Interesting. I was at the Carlow and Longford game yesterday in the Leinster Football Championship, and Carlow were in big trouble at half time, and we were just chatting to Pádraig Davis, the Longford manager, after, and he just said, the fair play to Carlow, they turned it around. He said, and like that's nothing to do with team talks or anything like that. He just said Carlow had hard runners in the second half. They had 3 to 4, 5 lads running off the shoulder, like in the second half. They were just constantly at it. And that he basically said that just comes down to players kind of wanting to make those runs, wanting to make those really hard runs. And it just didn't seem like in the first half yesterday that, I don't know how flat Waterford were or what the story was with their training or whatever. They were really flat and didn't look like they wanted to make those runs, whereas Clare were making those runs all day long. And just like we focused a good bit on Waterford here at the start of the show, and maybe it's only natural because they were All-Ireland finalists last year and Munster finalists as well. But like I think this Clare performance was a real mixture of, the old kind of tactics of the 80s, 90s, and as long as hurling has been going and any sport has been going, mixed with modern tactics as well. They brought all the work rate, but all the intensity, brought everything with the street smarts of letting Waterford have the puck outs, letting John Conlon sit back, pressing when they needed to press, not pressing when they didn't need to press. I thought it was a really, really polished performance like that. Like people, old fellas would say in particular, they'd say, at the end of the day, it's man on man or whatever, and, go in and work hard. And don't get me wrong, that all still applies. When you apply that with really, really smart, kind of efficient tactics that kind of accentuate the best of you and trying to put pressure on the opposition team. As you say, Waterford didn't know what to do when they had the sharp puck out. And that was obviously a Clare tactic. Clare sat back, filled those pockets. They'd know where to put the ball. They didn't seem to have the energy to run the ball in the first half as well. So Waterford were left with, there was guys in possession there and they didn't know what to do with the ball. Whereas Clare were just so smart with and without the ball. Like look at John Conlon's performance yesterday. Like I have to say, and I didn't hear anybody after the Antrim game saying John Conlon should be centre back for Clare. They need to try that, keep it with that experiment. I didn't hear anybody saying it at all, and it turned into an absolute masterstroke. Just brains, like just pure brains. And he's obviously not going to cover the ground maybe as some other players, but he's just so smart yesterday. Was in the right position the whole time. Was cutting off angles the whole time, and as it was highlighted on the Sunday game last night, like as a forward playing as a back, knowing how a forward wants a ball, the ball he was giving into Shannon was on an absolute play for him. And, fair play to him, because I don't think too many people would have called it John Conlon being man of the match in the Munster Championship first round after that Antrim game. So fair play to Brian Lohan for persisting with it, and fair play for Conlon for obviously embracing what is a new challenge, particularly at age 32. Like they say, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, but by Jesus, he's fairly blown that kind of theory out of the water.
And didn't we only talk the other day about the value of experienced players? Like, he's going out there in a new position and it doesn't bother him. It doesn't take a funk out of him. He goes out and he takes over in the vast majority of the game. I mean, Waterford were very poor and they'd be the first to admit it themselves, but you have to be able to capitalise on it, and he did. And you brought up a good one beforehand. What are the great positional switches that we've seen in GA? Either code. I mean, the first thing that came to mind for me was, obviously Conway went from 14 to 6, so that is a pretty dramatic switch. Aidan O'Shea going to full back in the All-Ireland semi-final. Just to mark Kieran Donaghy was a gas one. I was thinking Tipperary, and I was like, remember when Diarmuid Fitzgerald went from wing back up to full/corner forward under Babs? That didn't really work out, to be honest.
John Carroll was obviously transitioned, and he did work out in the forward line.
He did, yeah. He went for and Brian Whelan, of course, going from wing back to full forward mid-game.
They don't get much better than that now. You don't get much better than that in All-Ireland final, and ending up, under pressure from Brian McAvoy. I think he 3 points got off, and then all of a sudden he ends up with 1-6. I presume he was man of the match. I presume he was. I can't remember. And he gets the full forward all-star as well. Like, that's just phenomenal kind of stuff, really. But it'll be interesting to hear any other like miracle switches or switches that change games or change seasons. It's funny, like, even if you're looking back through like qualifier runs that teams went on, even like Kerry, I said Donaghy came in. Donaghy was a midfielder, wasn't he, with Kerry, and all of a sudden they were beaten by Cork in the Munster Championship. He ends up full forward against Longford and basically revolutionises football for a couple of years.
A good comment in here from Will. Verney is rapidly becoming the Midlands answer to Johnny Bravo that hair. Oh God, I used to love that cartoon.
Well, I tell you what, the hair's only going to get longer. This is actually a fresh enough cut, so it's going to get a lot longer than this.
Good comment in here from John S. TJ Ryan to full back, Brian Corcoran to full forward. I'm wondering, is that my father, John S? Is he coming in with an adjusted name there?
Corcoran to full forward, Shane. Like that. Yeah. That, like, Cork, as we talked about experience the other day, Cork needed someone really experienced. They're after losing Satanta from the year before. Corcoran comes in full forward, and I actually watched it again the other day, or the picture came up somewhere of him on his knees. You know that picture after the final whistle, and he's after scoring the point off Noel Hickey, where I don't know how he scored it. He was off out at the sideline. That was an inspirational kind of a switch as well.
Yeah. Well, maybe would you say Ken McGrath going from centre forward for 7 years back into centre back? There's a bigger change going from full forward to centre back, but there's still quite a change in that also. I think it's very difficult to go from playing the backs all your life to somewhere like centre forward. So there must to some degree be that feeling going the other direction. As a native back, I found it more difficult the other way. I don't know if you're the same. You would have definitely gone up the field for Burr once or twice, would you?
Yeah, I would have had. Condon said yesterday, it was interesting what he said, and I think this is a fair point. It's much easier to transition in many ways from a forward to a back because you're facing the ball. Like, if you're a back all your life and you go up into the forward line and all of a sudden you're the one being bullied now and you have a lad flying in on top of you every time you're catching the ball, that's a completely different task. So, like, at least he's going back centre back and he's facing the ball and he can see everything that's going on. But it's an amazing switch, really. Like, when you're looking at it, they were missing Pat O'Connor this year, obviously. I think he actually suffered a cruciate injury earlier on the year that kind of went under the radar. So they needed to switch up something. And I just couldn't have envisaged it working as it did. And we had a comment in from one of the viewers saying that when he played centre back with Clonlara, it didn't work. And now all of a sudden they're after persisting with it, and it's after working at county level, which is a serious achievement.
And Aaron Fitzgerald wasn't available. Shane O'Donnell wasn't available either. Like, Clare were absolutely brilliant, and there's no two ways about it. John S says we're not actually related, so the owl lad, you need to
lucky for him.
Yeah, well, the owl lad, you need to get some comments in here. Andrew Sullivan, Pat Fox going from corner back to corner forward. I mean,
that's a fact. Yeah.
Absolutely massive for Tipperary, and a big reason for winning stuff.
For him to go from a corner back to like a really nippy, dangerous corner forward is another story as well.
A natural looking corner forward.
Exactly.
Kieran Fennelly, Tommy Walsh started his Kilkenny career at full forward. Brian Cody won an All-Star in every line of the field. So, I mean, yeah, we've seen Brian Cody both full back and full forward over the years. A couple of other comments coming in as well. Gandon won Sean Collier. Lads, possibly as well just a case of Waterford suffering a severe hangover from the whole hype of getting to last year's All-Ireland and failing. Draining on those lads, maybe. Do you think that's a little bit of an unfair comment?
Do you know what? you potentially always think that that's in the background, but after turning around their league with a victory over Limerick and Tip, I kind of thought they turned the corner, and any idea of that drain was kind of gone. But yeah, potentially, Waterford had pressure yesterday, and maybe some of their best performances last year was when the pressure of favouritism wasn't there. They weren't favourites against Cork. They weren't favourites going into the Munster final against Limerick. They probably were marginal favourites going in against Clare in that quarter final. They weren't favourites going in against Kilkenny. It's funny when expectation is heaped on someone's shoulders. If anything, it makes it harder to deliver. And they just didn't deliver when the pressure was on yesterday.
Yeah, Lionel Strongjaw, since Waterford's forwards were very blunt with only Stephen Bennett scoring from play, do you think that Liam Cahill should push Austin Gleeson back up as a forward? Again, just a reminder, we're brought to you by OUrgreRetro.com. If you want to get one of these cool Down or Derry jerseys there, go to OUrgreRetro.com and use the promo code OUrgame. Michael Verney's mammy is, of course, ringing him again. He's after dropping off the call. But that's an interesting point about Austin Gleeson. Something that we talked about in the lead up to the game. We did the top 10 hurlers in Ireland power rankings. I was pushing hard for Gleeson to be in there, but no look, both on the comments from our viewers, and Michael Verney wasn't necessarily having it, albeit recognising that he is an excellent player and unbelievably talented. But a point I'd make is that if he can play wing back and obviously moved up the field a little bit and certainly pushed up the field as the game went on, if he can score 4 points from play, throw a free in there as well, in a team that's struggling really, really badly, you've obviously got an unbelievably talented player there. And I'm just, Michael, now that you rejoin us, I'm just talking about...
Someone ringing me to abuse me, Shane. Some hurling supporter ringing me, abusing me there.
Surprise.
You're dead right.
I was just, the comment came in there about Austin Gleeson, and I was just talking about in the power rankings that he didn't, despite my pushing, he didn't quite make it into the top 10. But again, he scored 4 points from play, despite being wing back for most of it, despite his team being absolutely terrible. Now, he was on the edge a couple of times and probably should have got a second yellow card for being a little bit loose on the hurley across Tony Kelly. But by some distance, I thought he was Waterford's best player. I always believe he should be in the forward line here, but obviously the injuries might be contributing to the fact that he's back down the field. But look at how good he was last year when he was up in the forward line. And their attack was so blunt. 5 of the 6 starting forwards didn't score. Is this going to force Liam Cahill's hand now to put him back in the forwards? And do you accept he's in the top 10 players?
That's a fairly loaded question. A lot will depend on whether Prunty and Barron are fit to play the next game, because all of a sudden Prunty goes back in 3 and Barron goes back in midfield. You have the option of actually putting Gleeson forward. But I tell you what, I really admire in him. The 2 games that Waterford have really struggled in the last 7 or 8 months, or the All-Ireland final and yesterday, and even the Cork 3 games, even the Cork game, the first round of the league, and who was their best player in all 3 games? Austin Gleeson, to be fair. And while maybe would have been questioned before, did he deliver, when Waterford needed him or when Waterford weren't going well, in the last 7 or 8 months, he's been, in defiant mood when things haven't been going well for Waterford. So I would imagine he'd push up a small bit into that kind of half forward midfield role. But he can do as much damage, Shane, from half back midfield as he can from, in the forwards with the way things are at the moment. But when the attack is that blunt, I do appreciate that you might need a focal point even on the edge of the square or something like that. Cahill's gonna mix things up a good bit. And it's funny, you talked about Kevin Moran's versatility, almost shooting him in the foot. Gleeson's could as well. He could end up somewhere completely different, and he could possibly end up out of the game the next day, been moved somewhere where they're trying to make something happen. But in fairness to him, he's really stood up. Is he in the top 10? I'm not going to move him into the top 10 based on one performance. I didn't have a Waterford player in the top 10. I still wouldn't after the weekend.
Yeah, I would have beforehand, and I still would again. Richard Commons is after coming in on Twitter about the players that have changed their position. He said Kildare's legendary defender Davy Dalton started off as a very low-scoring corner forward. He obviously made himself into a very, very good player. I just want to add in something else as well. On the way back to Dublin yesterday from Semple Stadium, I stopped off in a garage to get a little sup of petrol, a bit of diesel for the car. And Michael in Circle K, he says that he watches the show. Sorry, I can't remember your surname. But he wanted to give an old word, and he wanted his shout out. So there you go.
And listen, if Circle K want to come in on board as sponsors, our game, they're more than welcome.
Patrick Hickey says Clare's Energy was a team that had this game in mind. Looks like Waterford were maybe one eye on the tip game also. Is that fair? Unfair?
I think that's, there's some potential truth to that. Definitely. It was definitely been, Waterford were been billed as, probably one of the teams that could probably have a good crack at Limerick this year. There were 2 games away from that. Maybe they had their eye on tip. I know I thought they were going to win on Sunday, and I thought they were going to be Tip in a Munster semi-final. So shows what I know about the whole thing.
Oh, it is true. You're rarely correct about these things. Do you know what? It does feel like a long time ago since Clare went up to Antrim. Massively long trek. I'd say it was the guts of 4 hours. Antrim had been back training a little bit sooner, ended up winning the game. But all the talk was about how Clare are circling the drain. The horrible winter they'd had, the fighting with the county board, money issues, this public, denouncements of people that at county board meetings. But when you think about it, Brian Lohan, he's overseeing a revival despite predictions of an Offaly-esque fall. And I'm not actually saying that to try and wind you up, but people were talking about, are Clare moving in this direction? They've had no underage success. That in a couple of years' time, when Tony Kelly and a few more leave the scene, what on earth are they going to do? And yet he's kind of pushing for a revival here.
Yeah, I thought Brendan Cummins' the intro to his column in The Independent today was interesting. He just said sometimes if there's a row in a family and others start to interfere, offering their opinion, the family can actually come together, starting to turn on outsiders. That's what happened in Clare over the past 2 months, and I do agree. Everybody was taking pot shots. Any hurling pundit, when asked the question, was given their opinion, and it did seem like the whole world was coming down on top of Clare. And in fairness to Lohan, like he's really steadied the ship big time. As you said, that game in Corrigan Park, there were so many caveats to that. Like, I think that game was played at 1:00 on a Sunday. Clare, obviously, after making a big trip, it was a lot of things against them, maybe a smaller ground as well. And let's not forget a brilliant Antrim performance. Cummins also makes an interesting point, and I do think this is very valid, and it's something that we talked about yesterday or on Thursday's show. You asked the question, will Waterford waste? And waste was the key word. Would they waste Calum Lyons on Tony Kelly? And all of a sudden, Calum Lyons was playing in like cornerback at various stages in a position that he's not familiar with. Kelly's familiar enough with playing in corner forward. He was able to do damage. Not only was Lyons a fish out of water at cornerback, and his man was doing well on him, but they were also completely missing that attacking threat that he offers. So I think that was really, really smart. We talked earlier about mixing, tactics with work rate or whatever, but that was really smart. That was almost, Waterford were going to shoot themselves in their foot. All of a sudden then, when Lyons started pushing forward, Waterford looked like a different proposition anytime he got the chance to go forward. But when he was on Kelly, like, that was a man-marking mission. He wasn't basically going anywhere else. He was just following him. And I thought that was really smart. That was turning what potentially could have been a disadvantage from Clare into an advantage for them. So I thought that was very smart. Lohan got all the big calls right, in fairness.
And Cahill would have seen that coming. Like, he absolutely would have seen it coming. But he was obviously thinking, I can't afford to have Tony Kelly scoring 8 or 9 from play. Thing is, Kelly did that last year against Limerick in a Munster quarter-final, but the rest of the team was structured so well that, the team itself, the banner, they couldn't actually go ahead and win the game. So you wonder if you rob Peter to pay Paul. And like, you made a very good point about his ability with the ball, and that ties into what I was saying earlier about the puck outs. Who was coming off the shoulder? Who was coming at pace, breaking tackles, going up through the centre, committing lads? There wasn't really anybody like that. That's what Tyke de Burke is brilliant at. That's what Jamie Barron. So you've robbed the main advantages that allowed Waterford to counter-attack so well. And Sean Flynn, who we had on last year doing a couple of videos talking about tactical analysis and puckouts and stuff like that, he made a great point about teams counter-attacking to score, and how, you win a turnover and then you go at pace and capitalise on a team. And that just didn't happen for Waterford. But when they brought Calum Lyons out the field, and maybe, I suppose it was the last 15 or 20 minutes, they just completely took over the game. So at the stage of the 50th minute, I can't remember the exact minute he changed his position, but it was 118 to 11 points with 51 minutes of the game gone. That's a 10-point lead. For the rest of the game, Clare scored just 4 points. It was 10 points for Waterford. So they completely took over. Now, there's obviously an element of Clare, just what we have, we'll hold, and we'll sit back and we'll make sure we don't concede any goals. Absolutely understand that. But at the same time, Waterford went for a goal off a free at one stage. Stephen Bennett went for it and a couple of people kept it out. They were obviously forcing that sort of a goal type situation. And there was another one as well. I thought this was a key miss. I mean, I've obviously waxed lyrical about Austin Gleeson there, but it was 121 to 19 points. And Austin Gleeson did a great run. I think Caleb Lyons, who had moved up the pitch, had fed him a ball, and he was bursting through. Like, he was now getting ball off the shoulder, and he was able to solo through. And it would have brought it back to like 4 points at that stage. And he had it back on the stick, and he struck it off the stick and sliced it, and it went wide. And at that stage, there was still 3 or 4 minutes to go, and it kind of robbed them of a little momentum. And they got a couple more scores after that, but it let Clare off the hook just that little bit and allowed them to keep that small bit margin of comfort. And they obviously ran out of road a little bit. But Waterford's rotten run in Munster continues. I think since the Munster final in 2016, where, I don't like bringing this up, but Tipperary won by 21 points. They've only, as far as I know,
I hate talking about it.
Yeah, look, I'm the last lad you'll get talking about that. But no, like, it's been so poor in Munster since. The win over Cork aside, which a lot of people last year seemed to find a surprise, or certainly weren't backing them to win that game. I think that's the only game they've won since. It's quite a rotten run in Munster, and Clare are probably obviously delighted to end their fairly rotten run.
Yeah, no, 100%. Just on something you said there, which, in fairness to Cattle, I totally understand why he had to put Caleb Lyons and leave him in there. They were worried about the inexperience in the full back line. They were basically, they were missing their full back. So he felt they couldn't maybe leave potentially, Clare could have had nearly their strongest line, the full forward, and it would have been Waterford's weakest without Prunty at full back. So I understand why he put Lyons in there and stuck with that for a while. Just an interesting question from one of our viewers, Mark Tobin, asked on Saturday. He just said, at Shane saying that ML Verney, has the art of defending been lost when you look at the score lines in the Leinster Championship this weekend? Even the losing teams managed to clock up over 20 points each. It's funny what a difference 24 hours can make. Like, I think the art of defending was there for all to see in Thurles yesterday, particularly on a Clare side. I thought how they fronted up, how they spoiled. There was an instance in the first half where Shane Bennett was that frustrated with Paul Flanagan that he actually drop-pucked the ball around his ankles and just pulled, because Flanagan was that much in his face. And Clare were in their faces, particularly in defence. Rory Hayes never I know the ball coming into Deise Hutchinson was poor, but he never really gave him a sniff at it. Like, to me, that is defending. That, like, it's not like, oh, you get one ball, I get one ball. It's, I'm going to do whatever it takes for you not to get the ball. It was classic old school defending. It was, if my man scores a point, then that's a point off me and I am playing a bad game. So it was, stop your man getting the ball, stop your man getting a score. So while there mightn't have been much defending on show on Saturday, in what was really the only real championship game of the weekend, in my opinion, there was proper defending on show, particularly from Clare. Like, it was real in-your-face stuff. It was exactly what you expect from championship hurling.
Well, yeah, a scoreline of 122 to 21 points is far more typical of what you would have seen from hurling for the last 15 or 20 years. Before that, maybe the scorelines were even lower still. I can even think of a couple of All-Ireland finals that were won on scorelines of like 114, something like that. Whereas
13-12 in 99, wasn't it? Or 99, yeah, with Clare, or with Cork and Kilkenny.
And like these days, it'd be almost a joke if you put up that sort of scoreline. You know, we've talked about all the different kind of innovations that mean it's now easier to score, better slitters, better hurleys, players, more S&C done, all this kind of stuff. But yeah, like you make a very good point there about the tallies been put up at the weekend, and I just go through a couple of them from the different tiers. Wexford put up 531 on Laois. Dublin put up 331 on Antrim. Even good scoring between Carlow and Kildare, 222 to 316. Kerry 224, down 121. And I mean, this one, obviously it's down to Laurie Maher, the lowest tier, but Longford putting up a crazy 825. And you'd think if Loud were told you're going to score 319, you'd be thinking, oh, we're not going to do so bad. We're obviously going to be in contention here. But conceding 8 goals. But you know, if we refer to those 3 games in the Liam McCarthy level, so Clare won 22, Waterford 21, and then those big scorelines between Wexford and Dublin against Laois and Antrim. I just totted it up there, the amount of scoring chances, and everyone tots them up differently when they're doing stats. I would consider a scoring chance that if I was straight through on goal and I was trying to hand pass a ball to you and you had a simple tap in and someone flicked it away, I would consider that a chance. I mean, Aaron Shanahan tried to hand one off to somebody late on in the game, and it was a great flick away from Neil Montgomery. You know,
it's not a shot on goal, but it's a chance. Yeah.
Yeah, or like let's say I'm 45 yards out and I turn to take a strike over the shoulder, as I always do, as you can imagine, and the ball drops short to the goalkeeper. Like, I was going for a score, so I would consider that a chance as well. Yeah. Whereas I wouldn't necessarily consider a long ball that dribbled out over the corner, you know, where I was trying to deliver it to Deise Hutchinson or whatever, and it spills over the end line. Is that a scoring chance? It's a wide, but is a scoring chance. So anyway, to look at the 3 games, Dublin had 53 scoring chances, Antrim 32. So there was 75 in that game. There was 105 scoring chances in Wexford Laois, and there was 87 in Clare Waterford. So Dublin put up a much bigger scoreline than either of the teams in that Munster clash. Yet there was far more scoring chances in Clare against Waterford. But what it averaged out at is 89 scoring chances per game, or per team, 45 scoring chances in a game. Teams often want about 70%.
Other way around, Shane. 45 per team, 89 per game. Is that what you're
apologies. Yeah. But like, if you're having 45 chances in a game per team, just to average that out there, you're looking for about 2/3 of them to be converted. A scoring efficiency of 67%, give or take. So you're looking at about 30 scores per team. And that's before you even convert goals to points. So it's at another level altogether, isn't it?
Yeah, it definitely is. To be fair, as we said there, the Munster Championship game was a championship game where there was generally, you know, I know Clare had guys free at different stages, maybe taking shots, but generally, particularly on the Waterford side, there was an awful lot of pressure on shots. In the Leinster Championship, there was an awful lot less pressure on shots. It looked an awful lot more like the league. And you have to say as well, obviously, you know, the kind of gulf or chasm in class between Wexford and Laois and Dublin and Antrim compared to 2, what you would say even beforehand, you would have said 2 very evenly matched sides in Waterford and Clare. That 105 scoring chances is fairly, you know, like, it's huge. Like, that is massive. Like, you just would not have envisaged 10 or 15 years ago that a game would be like that. And I know to some people that has been viewed as maybe boring potentially, but the only thing I'd say is, you know, judge hurling on 2 evenly matched teams playing each other.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
And also judge it when there are crowds in there. Like, it's an embarrassing crowd of 200 people there yesterday. I saw Tommaso O'Shea tweeting about it. He's always kind of pushing, you know, like a bit of scrutiny on what's going on. And it's great to see. I think he's been a very good voice in that sense. I mean, I'm driving back up through Dublin. I look on the canal. There's more people on the Grand Canal as I'm driving back in through the city than there are at Semple Stadium.
And did you go in and join them?
I didn't. Big odd, and I didn't. I was straight home to watch the Sunday game and a small bit of the Euros as well, because I can't get enough of that either. Like, my housemate, he's a gay man. He was in at the Pride Parade. He showed me a video of thousands of people on the street. I've no real issue with that. I mean, work away. I've got into the Pride Parade with him before. No issue at all. But the thing is, if you're there for the right cause, it's not going to be put up in the media. It's not going to be talked about. It's not going to be scrutinised. There's going to be no interference in people gathering. But it just seems in this country, unless you're supporting the right cool cause, you know, you're going to get absolutely hammered. So, I mean, take away people's virtue signaling and let's actually just analyse this thing. Is it okay to do stuff outdoors if you have the right kind of protocols in place? Absolutely. So can we please just stop with the sort of mental gymnastics here and get people back into grounds?
Yeah, I was at the Curragh on Saturday, Shane, for the Derby. There was 1,000 people there. Now, it looked like there was more than 1,000 people there, but they were all so spread out. The same as the GA grounds. Like, like these big stadiums, be it horse racing or hurling or football or whatever it is, like, they're huge. Like, I know Michael Dignan was saying, like, there was no reason why we couldn't have 30%. And, like, seriously, in massive stadiums like Thurles and that, like, even just say 8,000 in Thurles is not a drop in the ocean for the size of the ground that it is. No more than, you know, 5,000 or 6,000 would be in O'Connor Park as well when you spread them out. Like, it's ridiculous to think that we're, you know, still, you know, that far behind so many other countries that were, you know, piloting and, you know, trialing events when, there could be 10 or 15,000 people at something in England, or you look over in America and I think they saw 140,000 people at a NASCAR race or something like that. It's just a bit bizarre, like 200 in for a big championship game when so many more could be spread out so safely. It just beggars belief, really.
Yeah. It just says to me, question those in charge at all times and don't just take everything you've heard and say, oh yeah, I'll go with that. Let's see now. Will says, Stapo probably chanced his arm for now, free jambon in the Circle K. Look,
Good man, Will.
Well, I'm trying to get myself championship ready. That sort of talk is an absolute disgrace.
And when you go away and you were stuffing your face with biscuits and coffee before we went on air, would you stop?
Yeah, but they're healthy biscuits now.
Gluten-free and carb-free biscuits.
Adrian O'Loughlin, actually, the mother sent me back up with an apple tart yesterday, and of course, it all went down the hatch with a bit of cream. Adrian O'Loughlin said it should not be a surprise Clare won. Last year against Waterford, Clare were down Conlon, the two Galvins, Duggan, a half-fit David McInerney, and Kelly on one leg. Clare at full tilt with Shane O'Donnell also back are a fair team. That is a really good comment. I think Adrian has kind of hit a lot of nails on the head there. They're a serious proposition.
Yeah. And they've bought time for Shane O'Donnell. Like Shane O'Donnell will surely be back for the game after the next game. They've bought time. They've bought time for him.
He'll be back for the Munster final after beating Tipperary.
Well, I'm just saying that they're definitely going to have another game. They're not just going to have two games. I think the point that Colm Galvin, I thought it was kind of smart, even the role that they used yesterday. He was only getting back up to speed in the league, but he did look a much better player yesterday, much more like himself. I thought he was very smart on the ball. He probably maybe knows that he doesn't have as much work done as others. And, he got the ball to someone in a better position. Before, he probably would have carried ball and maybe taken it 20 or 30 yards. I thought he was very smart yesterday. He knew his role. As The Rock said, he knew his role and he played it to perfection too.
Would you say if this was a normal Colm Galvin performance, let's say 3 or 4 years ago when he hadn't had injury issues, I would have said it would have been a very quiet Colm Galvin performance. But given how he had played in the couple of games I'd seen him in the league, where they're of course just trying to get minutes into him and get him back up to speed and all that, the games had entirely passed him by. I can only think of a handful of times where he even had the ball in his hand. I think that they'd be very happy to think he got on the ball a bit, he used it well, the trajectory is this way. It was still a relatively quiet performance, but where will he be the next game and the game after? So I think that's why it's positive.
It's all relative, Shane. Just say you were playing for Coola and you have a full training under your belt and you've played all the practice matches. You're at a different level going into a championship game. Just saying you've missed half the training, you've only played bits and pieces of matches. If you play a championship match, like you'd be delighted with a 7 out of 10 where you've done a lot of just good things for the team, whereas maybe you weren't able to express yourself as much as you'd like to. And I think that's the same with Galvin. It's all relative. Context is king, really. How much has he actually got in the tank? I think he did a perfect job for the amount of training he's had under his belt after that serious groin injury.
Lohan might even just have been thinking the first couple of games, we just want to get minutes into his legs.
Yeah.
We don't care what happens. Don't care if you get on the ball. We trust you, Colm Galvin. You've proven it before. Just get minutes into your legs and we know the form will come. So that's the way sometimes players and managers are thinking. Will, imagine what Lohan would be able to do with a decent county board behind him. I'm sure there's many people with a lot of frustration in Clare. Maybe the county board would have something different to say. Rory O'Grady, Clare crowded their half back line very well. No space for Hutchinson, Shane Bennett and co. Absolutely not. No decent ball went in there. Shane Brophy and Nina Guardian. Huge mistake taking Calum Lyons out of the half back line. Interesting to see what Clare do with Kelly next Sunday. They played Kelly at full forward to take Lyons out of wing back. And that's something we'll definitely come to in Thursday's show, the different options that Tipperary might have. Let's see now what Adrian Loughlin is after adding in as well. I'm after.
Can I just say, Shane, as well, on Lohan, this is defiant from Lohan. This is the Brian Lohan that we saw on the pitch for years, flying out with ball in that red helmet that he'd no right to be getting. He's after doing the exact same. If you look at him after games, he's a quiet, kind of reserved, shy enough fella, but he had them absolutely spitting fire yesterday, and it was a real defiant performance, just like he would have done on the pitch back in the glory days.
Yeah, Adrian O'Loughlin added, Clare might not have won at underage lately, but 17 minors produced Dermot Ryan and Aidan McCarthy, and they're both looking really, really good. We've talked a lot about certainly Aidan McCarthy, and he got a couple of points, and God, I wondered if they had to feed him more what he would have scored yesterday. 2018, Mark Rogers, the 19 team, Keane Galvin, Flannan's won Harty with an all-Clare team, plenty of hurlers in the county, so very interesting points, and maybe
it's different, Shane. It's not like, people making that ridiculous comparison with Offaly. Offaly hadn't had much underage success. Clare have been tipping away nicely. Flannan's only won a Harty last year.
Well, they haven't been winning games, though. They haven't been winning games for 5 or 6 years. That's the thing.
Okay. But even like Flannan's winning a Harty last year will show you that the conveyor belt is not like, it's not as if it's stalled completely. There's plenty there. People would have said maybe would have worried that they might be a bit behind physically, and that's maybe a lot to do with the facilities available to them. But it's not as if they haven't been producing anything at all. Like.
Yeah, William Feehan. Those players will throw Liam Cahill and Mikey Beavens under the bus like they did to Pádraig Fanning. I hope Liam Cahill makes changes. Patrick Curran should be starting. This is a comment, and I think it might have been the same guy who put a comment up on the YouTube video last night, my review of the game, that he feels that these players, I suppose it's referring to downing tools a little bit. Certainly, I think a lot of people in Waterford would have been frustrated with how the players played in Pádraig Fanning's one season in 2019. It'd be good to get him on someday and just ask him his thoughts on that, although obviously it would be a difficult one to talk about.
I don't think the down tools, though, Shane, yesterday, they didn't start well at all and looked very flat, but they finished with a flourish, you know what I mean?
Yeah, they were down half a team. They were down half a team. Whatever was, maybe the mindset wasn't right of some of the players. Hard to know. Maybe some of them went out thinking we're missing so many players. They went out with a beaten attitude. Very, very hard to know. But the way that they kind of circled the wagons in the second half and made a good push back, I think that would suggest that the tools haven't been down. And considering what they did last year, to think that all of a sudden players that couldn't get into the team last year because of injuries and absences are now getting into the team this year, would they down tools? Like the lads who are injured, they're obviously not down in tools, they're just injured. So other lads are now getting a chance. They'd be excited to get in there. So I don't see how that would necessarily make sense to me. Maybe William has different ideas of why.
I agree with you, Shane, as well. And it's not as if he's picking from the same crop of players as you're saying. Like loads of, like, I can't name a lad that hasn't really got a chance with Waterford. They've all gotten their chances. So I don't know if that's fair comment, but maybe he knows something that we don't know.
Yeah, Furry, Waterford didn't change running the ball. It didn't work and was visible early. Need to shoot from distance and suck out Clare. You need to mix game up. But their half-forward line never got in the game, whether it was they didn't get free from their men or they weren't being found by the men behind them, or Clare just managed to choke up the area. There's a lot of different reasons. Will, I'd say the art of defending isn't lost. Just so many long-distance scores that you aren't getting to see JJ Delaney-type catches and bursting out, or Kilkenny rabid defending in packs. MR7 completely agree with Verney. Art of defending was there yesterday. However, one time John Conlon made 2 legal tackles on Shane Bennett and the ref blew for a free. Ref needs to get those calls right. Sean Collier, Lohan ball defending yesterday. Great to see. Jim Hogan, lots of comments coming in, and please do keep them coming. It's so easy to score a point from anywhere now. The value of a goal is being diminished. Do you think it is
Shane,
really easy?
I disagree with that. It's easy to score a point if you have the class to score a point. There's so many lads. Like look at club level. It's not easy to score a point. It's just that the skill levels are gone through the roof now, and that lads feel
22
so
wides.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I disagree with that. Like you had a little video clip up with Joe Canning. He said, like, not everybody can do that. Not everybody can put a ball over from 120 yards. If everybody could do that, I think it would be a boring game. But it's only a lot, like, special. Like, the point Tony Kelly got after 90 seconds where he comes out and I don't even know. I don't know how he did. He flicked it over his right
the touch
shoulder.
as well. Like, I mean, what an unbelievable... At full speed to do that. With Caleb Lyons up their backside.
Yeah, like, not everybody can do that. And just something, Shane, that we didn't talk about. Like, what did you make of the penalty decision? It was definitely a yellow card because he pulled. I don't buy that it was a goal scoring opportunity, given the fact that Fives was still behind him, Ira Daly was still inside, and he still had to beat the keeper and was about 25 yards out. I'm not sure, and that was obviously, when you look at the scoreboard at the end of the game and all Clare's wides, the goal from the penalty was essentially the difference, and Shane Fives been in the sin bin for 10 minutes. Like, if you were showing me clips of cynical play over the last couple of years, I wouldn't have had that down as cynical play. I think it's a foul. I don't think that's not a goal scoring opportunity for me.
Well, I do think it was cynical that Shane pulled across him.
But it wasn't a goal scoring opportunity. Yeah.
No, I think that was very, very harsh. I'd like to know what Waterford people think of that, and Clare as well. Do they think it should have been a penalty? But I know the rule says they're careless use of the hurley, and that was being highlighted on the Sunday game. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, we're very quick to give out like black cards, and we're very quick to give out penalties and all this kind of stuff. And I don't know. I think life is becoming more and more impossible as a defender. Like it was.
I thought you were just saying life is becoming more and more impossible in general.
Well, it's not getting easier. And as Will says here, Stapleton sounds as if he's planning to set up a political party. No, it's just frustrating because there's such double think going on in Ireland.
Well, you have no idea how the wheels are spinning behind the scenes. Your statement will be truer than you realise in about 12 months' time.
Keith Scanlon, as usual, sure only talk about Waterford, no talk about Clare. Same old story from a tip lad. Is that fair? I think that's a bit unfair. I give a lot of credit to Clare here. I think they're very good. And Tip won't be able to keep it pucked out to them in the next round. Patrick Coleman, it took Waterford 3/4 of a match for it to sink in. They were not going to win. When they started to play, they were good, but left it too late. Bit of a hangover from last year. Verney, prior to this weekend, according to Andrew Sullivan, I will eat 10 hats if Clare win the All-Ireland. Can you ask him if his stance has changed?
There's a good one there. I'd be good friends with Andrew, and I was up. His father's a Lara man. He'd be a big fan of the Bonner Matter, and I was up in his house the week before the 2010 All Ireland final, and I said something along the lines of that I'd eat my hat if Tip won the All Ireland or something like that. I haven't since eaten my hat, but I still can't see Clare win the All Ireland if I'm being honest. I'll do a live video eating hats. Absolutely no problem if they do.
So we'll move on to the Leinster Championship now. Just a reminder that we're brought to you by OUrgame.com. If you want to get this down jersey, that Derry jersey, or any of the other ones that they have on their website, go to OUrgame.com and use the promo code OUrgame and you'll get 15% off. We're live on YouTube, Facebook and Twitter, so get your comments in. We'll bring them up on screen and chat about them. Also, if you want to get the audio podcast, the only place to do so is on Patreon. So go to patreon.com/OUrgame. $5 a month, you get lots of podcasts and a chance to support the channel as well. So the Leinster Hurling Championship over the weekend. On Saturday, it was all things Leinster. Dublin beat Antrim by 331 to 22 points. And also Wexford, they saw off leash by 531 to 123. That was both games were a bit of a pasting, really. And you know what? After all the talk of how Dublin aren't this and Dublin don't have that, I think that was a game where Matty Kennedy was under massive pressure to get a result. And by God, did they deliver.
Yeah, I was kind of just thinking back about it. And it's obviously his third year in charge. And I was kind of thinking, like, he probably hasn't been under this much pressure as a manager, I'd nearly say, since probably the All-Ireland club final replay in 2018, when ye were expected to win that drawn game. You obviously got over the line the second day, but there was a lot of pressure on that second day in Portlaoise. And I'd say, like, 3 years later, I'd say this is probably the most pressure he's been under since. I was definitely one of the people asking kind of questions of Dublin, and that's not to say I don't still have questions over them. I definitely do. But when it was put up to them the other day, like they were coming in, a lot of people were saying that, you know, potentially they could end up in a, you know, that relegation match to go down to the Joe McDonagh. Like, they absolutely blew Antrim away the other day. Just really, really clinical on the ball. Kind of like Clare as well. They put an awful lot of pressure on Antrim. The ball going into the Antrim forward line was nothing like what we've seen in previous games. Dublin really fronted up. They were on their man's shoulder. They were putting the pressure on that you'd expect to see in Championship hurling. And then at the other end of the pitch, you know, you go through all the forwards and you do well to find one of them that didn't have a good game. They all had a big impact, both on the scoreboard and even just working back the field. And even someone like Danny Sutcliffe, who we've talking about, who has the potential to cut loose. And we always, like, how many times have we referred, it's 8 years ago now, but how many times have we referred to, is he going to return to 2013 form? Like, we see glimpses of it, but we definitely saw lots of it the other day, be it score taken and just how far back he was and how much work he was doing as well.
Yeah, you have to put into context the challenge of Antrim in that game. They were pretty poor. I think most Antrim fans would accept that themselves. And after the positivity of the league, beating Clare, obviously getting a couple of other really good results, this kind of has brought things back down. Like, you mean the draw against Wexford as well. It was kind of thrilling stuff, and everyone was thinking they're on a cusp of a wave now and the trajectory is going to keep going up. This is a big one now, and they face obviously a relegation playoff with Laois that's coming down the tracks here. But they were poor here. And Sutcliffe, like you said, he was brilliant. He was sort of a 9 out of 10 type performance. But all the forwards kind of had their way. Donald Burke, he scored 5 from playing 6 frees. He was really good out at centre forward. Ronan Hayes scored 1-3. We've waxed lyrical about him many times.
Fantasy Hurling was on to me the other day saying that I said that there was goals in Ronan Hayes, which I do believe there is.
took him out of the
I took
team.
him out of my team. The only thing I'd say is I put in Donald Burke, who got 5 from play and hit 6 frees. But like, they do look like they have like Ronan Hayes. like he played that game against Laois and was actually showed glimpses that day 2 years ago when they were beaten in O'Moore Park. But he's had time to adjust to senior intercounty and does look like a big threat. Cian O'Sullivan was good as well. Just one thing I want to jump back to quickly, Shane, on the Antrim point of view. How much even do you think potentially that their training may have been front loaded for Division 1 hurling, trying to survive in Division 1? Like, I'm not saying that like championship wasn't their main focus, but I wonder how much of a focus was on surviving in Division 1, because obviously they're going to be up there again next year. They're going to get more exposure at that higher level. I'm not saying that was more important, but I do wonder, like, were they peaking maybe maybe a month or 6 weeks ago when they felt if they'd been blown away by Clare or been blown away by Kilkenny or Wexford or whoever, it would have been very, very demoralising for the future of the side going forward. So I just wonder, did they front load even a lot of their fitness or a lot of their focus for some of those league games?
Do you know, it's a fair point, but I wonder, is it more so what the opposition were doing and when they were timing to be right for? Because I don't see that it's possible that Antrim would have peaked for the league, and here we are 7 or 8 weeks later, and all of a sudden they're on the down swerve on the peak. When you think in a normal season, you might have to peak for 3 or 4 months, 6 months, who knows, depending on how it goes, if the league is a big target for you and you want to take that form into the championship. So I think it might be more that the likes of Dublin, who, teams like Wexford, who put up a massive scoreline, we'll talk about Wexford shortly, but it's more that they're now fresh and that they're maybe not going through their really heavy training block. And it was kind of midway through the first half that Dublin took over in the league game at Parnell Park. And again, it was similar enough here. Antrim had started out well enough. It was 6 points each after 16 minutes. And then just Dublin took over. It went from 6 each to being 13-7 ahead. And then once Cian O'Sullivan got that goal, and he sniped it brilliantly straight into the top corner.
Great finish, yeah. Real corner forward finish.
Yeah, it was absolutely brilliant. Ray McBride handed him a ball and he just went through. And I've seen Cian O'Sullivan at club level plenty of times. He played in the county final against us in 2019. Leo Varadkar was in the crowd supporting his St. Bridget's. I'm sure he's there all the time watching him. But he was really, really good that day and won some hard ball against us. And he was really good in this game. And I think he'd stepped away from the panel for a while, and he's back in now. And they've obviously gone down that route of more scoring forwards. And now maybe it's just something that was for this game only. But a lot of the time when I looked up in the, and Navan is obviously not used that often for inter-county hurling matches at Liam McCarthy level. But I looked up the field and you saw Cian Boland, you saw Cian O'Sullivan, and you saw Ronan Hayes all close to goal. Dublin clearly felt that they could get scores in this game. And the focal point was Ronan Hayes, and rightly so. Like, he's an excellent player, and he's probably only going to get better. Like, he's got the skill, the deftness. In some ways, he reminds me of Seamus Callanan. Now, I'm not saying he's at that level, and obviously Callanan got more towards his late 20s before we really saw his very best. But, like, what doesn't he have? He has speed. He's able to carry the ball. He's able to score from different angles. He's got a goal in it. He has a goal. He has a paw. He has a goal in him. So, like, those three lads were all up there. I thought some of the other things that really impressed me, obviously Danny Sutcliffe, really brilliant game here. He scored 3 points. Chris Crummy scored 3 points from the other wing forward slot. Not quite as good, I felt, in the sense that he went out of the game for like 25 minutes at one stage. I was wondering, where is he? And then all of a sudden he popped up with 2. And I wonder, would he score as much from wing back? But then again, he takes a lot of minding. So these are the things that Matty's obviously weighing up. I thought Liam Rush struggled at centre back, and obviously Rush had been injured lately. Neil McManus, he got 6. He ended up with 6. So I don't know if they were all on Liam Rush, but certainly I think he kind of struggled a little bit at times, but maybe there's more in him. So they're obviously weighing things up there for Dublin. But for Antrim, it is a big collapse. Like, there's no getting away from that. And do you kind of think it takes a lot of the gloss away from the obvious progress this year?
I tell you what, Shane, a lot of it will come back to that relegation match. The glass is nearly totally removed if they end up back down in the Joe McDonagh. You know, so it's a huge game. I think they have 2 weeks. Did I be right in saying? Is it 2 weeks?
I think it's 2. Yeah.
Like, that's a big game. It's gonna probably fly under the radar. But it's a huge game for both. You'd have to say, based on the weekend and based on what we saw throughout the league, and even the fact that they beat them in the league game, you'd have to make Antrim strong enough favourites to win that game. But the glass will be severely taken off if they ended up back down on Joe McDonagh. But I would expect them to regroup. At least they have, in the muscle memory from this year to have a few good performances against bigger teams, and they know they've beaten Laois already. I just want a quick question to you, Shane, about Dublin. We're not going to talk about it too much, but it is a completely different challenge the next day against Galway. Like, would you be optimistic going into that on the back of what you saw the other day?
You see, because we don't really know what we're going to get from Galway just yet. They were good in the league, but we've seen such transformations of different teams when they go from league to championship. You just don't know. Like you and I have both talked about it. We did the power rankings and we both put Galway at number 2, and neither of us really argued that. We kind of felt like they were the closest to Limerick. They had a good performance against Limerick, beat them, lost to Tipperary, put up quite a scoreline against Cork also. I think it will be a step up, definitely, but I think Dublin will certainly give them a good game. I just don't know if there's enough consistency in the scoring threat of Dublin. But putting up 331 here, that kind of makes me think, okay, maybe more scores are in the team. I think Donald Burke is something that they haven't really had in the last number of years, which is a guy who's going to score most of his frees, because the teams that are challenging at the top end, they're 90% free takers, 95% free takers, and that has been a bit of a problem for Dublin. It's been a problem for the likes of Wexford and a couple of other teams at different times, and I think he is, so far anyway, solving that. He's such a sweet striker. I don't know if you saw at one stage, there was a ball that went across him, and the defender was waiting to absolutely cream him, Paddy Burke, but he just flicked the ball over his head, turned and knocked it over the bar. Another thing actually I thought was strange, I mean, Darren Gleeson's got a lot of credit, and rightly so, but he left Owen Campbell on Danny Sutcliffe, and he continued to leave that matchup, and it didn't work, and Sutcliffe was able to drop off him. I'm sure Owen Campbell was told, maybe protect your full back line, but it was to the absolute detriment to the team, because Sutcliffe was able to go everywhere and just absolutely go to town. I do also wonder, as good and all as Antrim were and looked during the league, is this where the level of conditioning, that some of their players didn't look quite as athletic as Dublin's, and they're obviously only just a couple of years into the Darren Gleeson revolution, if you want to call it that. Maybe they need a little bit more time, but certainly they're moving in the right direction. Kieran Fennelly said, do you think that the Dubs can put it up to Galway next weekend? Can't remember the last time, if ever, I saw Dublin score 331. If Antrim were obviously poor, Wexford will put it up to Kilkenny for sure. Let's see also. Oh yeah, well, Dublin showed some nice touches yesterday, quite skillful and more than one scoring threat. Still, Galway will be a massive step up.
Just on that, Shane, I don't want to focus on it too much, but like Matty Kenny in 2019, they beat Galway and obviously went a bit downhill. But this is like, imagine this is a chance of like almost re-energizing his whole reign again. Were it to beat Galway, like that would be absolutely huge were it to beat Galway. All of a sudden they're in the Leinster final and, you know, an All-Ireland quarter-final and the whole, or possible semi-final, and the whole complexion changes.
And that's a very good point here from Will, that the most promising thing for Dublin was our spread of scorers need to have more than one or two threats up front. Look like we have them now. And with Trolley or Dillon being out for the season, we saw that he got an injury recently. That is a big one here. Joseph Ryan says, love that Derry jersey. As I said,
I think it's one of my favourites, to be honest with you. Yeah, it's an absolute peach. Yeah. Like you know that, like you couldn't imagine a team wearing that retro down jersey now, but you could definitely imagine a team wearing this one, like a modern day club team or county team wearing this.
Yeah, something like this. This will never get old.
I love that. I love the sponsorship on the front of it. Like it just brings back all memories from childhood.
Go to OUrgame and use the promo code OUrgame if you want to get 15% off. Tony Fitzpatrick, tip v Tony Kelly will be okay.
Oh God, I tell you, a bit more than Tony Kelly on the best yesterday. I don't know if O'Donnell will be back. That'll be a huge one. Must actually delve into what return to play protocols are within the GA, what you're technically supposed to abide by. Time out from a kind of a head knock, but if he was back, it would definitely make it even more interesting.
Any Antrim fans out there, if you have any thoughts on what went right or wrong here? I mean, your team overall created 32 scoring chances. Dublin nearly created that in the second half alone with 29. Just turned over far too often. And this was something that, you know, we talked about, and I said, you know, Dublin's athleticism would definitely count in this game. And there's no shortage of skill in that Dublin team either. Obviously, we've talked about before that maybe there's not quite the same grace in some of the forwards, but like, I think touch-wise, they're generally very, very good players, very neat, tidy. And with the likes of Ronan Hayes now and Keane O'Sullivan and Danny Sutcliffe and all that, I think they are beginning to add a little something more at the other end of the field. And like for Matty Kenny's reign, like, I mean, everyone is assuming this will be the last year or whatever. something like that. That could just be the spark that lights the fuse. And a couple of years ago when they beat Galway, people talk about, Galway didn't have this, that and the other, and Joe Canning only came on in that game, and that Conor Whelan came off during that game. Well, so too did Owen O'Donnell came off during that game, and Dublin were missing half their team anyway. So, don't rule them out entirely.
Just a quick one, Shane, on the art of defending as well. I think some people can get lost a bit sometimes on the art of defending as well. Like, how many times did Antrim strike a ball into the Dublin backline, and the Dublin backline were shoulder to shoulder or getting a flick or flicking it out to a free man? Like, that maybe might not be one-on-one defending when the forward has a ball and he's staring you in the eyes. But I thought Dublin defended really well like that as well. They got in those little flicks and got a lot of bodies around where the ball was going to be. Like someone like James McNaughton, who impressed an awful lot during the league, just couldn't really get on the ball. And a lot of the Antrim players couldn't get in the ball because Dublin were defending well and they were like right in on top of the Antrim lads. It just didn't allow them a lot of free time to strike. I would say though, McManus obviously was brilliant. Keelan Malloy got a couple of great scores as well. Someone who we've waxed lyrical about regularly. They're going to need all those players they're going to need a lot more players to step up in that kind of do or die game against Laois. But I would expect them to get through that.
Yeah, and then the poll that we were running there, can Liam Cahill turn around Waterford's fortunes this year? So 53.2% say yes, no, not good enough, 24%, and too many absentees say 22.8%. So it's relatively split, if we're honest with that particular.
Yeah, just
poll
on last year, Shane, he obviously turned around that Munster final defeat, got them back to an All-Ireland final. The tip minors were beaten, weren't they, when they went on to win the All-Ireland? The tip 20s or 21s were beaten were both of them beaten the Munster final as well?
Yeah, one of them won it. The other one had lost by 13 points to Cork down in Páirc Uí Chaoimh, if I remember correctly. Turned that around and gave the Rebels lots of it by in the All-Ireland final. We'll move on to the other Leinster quarter-final this weekend. Wexford 5-31, Laois 1-23. I mean, I'd said, we both said it. After watching that game down in Nolan Park when Kilkenny had their way with the models, were we being sold a pup there? I mean, they obviously didn't start with the likes of Kevin Foley. I can't remember. I don't think Lee Chin started that game. Conor McDonald certainly didn't. They won the second half by 4 points after getting roasted in the first half. They looked dead on their feet in that game. And 2 minutes into watching this game, I saw Diarmuid O'Keefe, who'd looked ropey enough during the league, and I was starting to think, all right, he's been on the road a long time now. Is it starting to catch up with him? He burned off with a ball early in this game, and I said to myself, well, do you know what? We were definitely sold a pup. The pace that Diarmuid O'Keefe is moving here, he's back. And then some of the other players as well look to be back. I mean, to put up the scoreline, they put up 5-31, 56 scoring chances. Laois made to look like a very, very poor team. I know what you have to take into account, the quality of the opposition and the challenge they put up. But I think this was a signal that Wexford aren't going backwards per se. Now, whether they're going to take a step forward and win a Leinster title or whatever is another step. They're going to have to do it the hard way against Kilkenny and then Galway or Dublin. But definitely it was a step in the right direction. And a first championship win since their Leinster final win of 2019.
God, yeah, I didn't even kind of think about that. But it's a lot of it goes back to Shane having they don't have a massive depth, and they've got 4 or 5 really key men. And, if Chin, Rory O'Connor or Conor McDonald aren't on the pitch, they're going to struggle in various sectors. Kevin Foley, the same as well. They can't afford to be without any of their big hitters. They had all of them available on Saturday, and all of them are in top form. Now, you have to take the caveat of, Laois put up very little resistance to them, but I think Rory O'Connor ended up at 1-7 from play. Conor Mack had 2-4 from play. Chin was very good as well. When their big hitters are in form, they're going to be hard beaten. They're coming into that Kilkenny game with a lot of confidence now. That's going to be a really, really interesting game. I know we'll talk about it more later on in the week. We go back to that league game, and we won't really know whether we were sold a pup until we see them facing off against Kilkenny and what they can bring. But yeah, they'll be happy to on the opposite side of the draw of Galway, and I think they'll smell the opportunity of a Leinster final. That's going to be a really interesting game.
Yeah, get your comments in there, whether on YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter. We're live on all the platforms there. But Laois were very poor. There's no getting away from it.
Did Laois play to win the game? Did Laois set up to win the game, or what way did it set up? It was unbelievably negative.
Well, they'd lost the league game by 4-17 to 10 points. So they probably, I think Seamus Cheddar-Plunkett knew that they were in for a pasting in this game. I think he did. And I know you interviewed Ross King there in the past week or so in the lead up to this game, and he was like, sure, look, if we were playing Limerick, we'd go out with belief that we can win the game. And I think every player does have to do that. You have to put yourself into the mode where
blind
you're going to win
optimism.
games. Yeah, you have
blind
to.
optimism.
Yeah, even on your, if it looks like your team have the worst possible prospects, you have to go along and do that. But it did look to me like they set up in such a way to contain the threat of Wexford and maybe not have the scoreline run up too badly. Maybe I'm doing them a disservice there.
Well, imagine, Shane, to say it like that, if you set up to contain and you concede 5-31.
Well, you see what was happening. What I saw was, like, and I watched the game on a stream, and it was in Nolan Park. And, short puck outs from Mark Fanning. He'd hit the ball out. Somebody would carry the ball 20, 30 yards. And you'd think at that stage, a bit like what happened between Clare and Waterford, that the Waterford players reach a certain stage and all of a sudden they're like, okay, I've carried the ball 20 yards here. All the opposition players are still in front of me, and they've set up in such a way that it's going to be very difficult to deliver the ball. But it seemed to me that whenever a back for Wexford carried the ball out, they still had huge options. They could just hand it to someone to run straight through the centre. They could pop a ball down into the corner for, Mikey Dwyer, Conor MacDonald, Lee Chin, Paul Morris, whoever, Rory O'Connor, who scored 1-7, like you said, to just take their time and just knock the ball wherever they wanted. You just wondered where was the pinch point going to happen? Where were Laois going to put the pressure on? I mean, they do look like a team that's off the mark physically compared with Wexford. Wexford are tanks. Most of them are tanks or lean as butchers' dogs. The Laois players, they're not. And that's not to be insulting. That's just, with the eye test, simply the other team looks far more athletic.
Yeah,
and
Cheddar has said that during the league as well. He even said that they were chasing physically to try and get up to the mark physically. So, like, I definitely think that's fair comment. I think relinquishing the puck out to a team that can run as effectively and as efficiently as Wexford can, as you say, I think that's okay if you meet them at the 45 or you meet them at the 65. And you meet them, with a lot of bodies and a lot of energy. But it just didn't look like they were being met. It just looked like they were relinquishing the puck out, and it didn't look like there was a press on really at any stage. I was listening to that game on Midlands 103, and it just very dispirited commentary from Jack Nolan. Very hard to find any real kind of nuggets of light or for Laois. The only one I'd say is, fairness to Chad Dwyer, when a lot of things were going wrong, probably Chad Dwyer and Paddy Person, like, really just kept the scoreboard ticking over.
A lot of poor whites from Chad Dwyer as well. He was good,
Yeah.
and he was driving them on. And, Ross King, when he got a few balls, and PJ Scully and Kieran Comerford, a few of them did do all right. But, like, I was underlining where scores came from turnovers. I mean, as ever, I do a sort of a map of the game and the amount of turnover scores. So it wasn't just a puck out. And, like, you have to be secure in possession, and this is where the athleticism comes into it, and the training and all that kind of stuff that takes you on to the next level. And they were just getting turned over far too often. Like, I never look at Laois teams and think they lack for skill. I think they have lots of really, really natural hurlers. But that's all well and good. You're not going to out-hurl a team for 70 minutes if the other team is able to overwhelm you physically. And, that hurling breaks down as you get more and more tired. So they were just completely punished. One little side note that I saw was Laois were withdrawing players so far down the field, even from sideline cuts, that 3 times in the first half. It was Diarmuid O'Keefe twice, and then once other, I can't remember who did the other one. I think it was Lee Moog McGovern. The two of them from Diarmuid O'Keefe went back to Mark Fanning and found him, and the other one almost ended in disaster. I think it was cut out, and Laois had a good chance. Yeah, Willie Dunphy had a chance of scoring a goal, and he ended up getting hooked. But it was just an interesting one that Wexford are always thinking on their feet. Michael Verney has gone missing on me again. I wonder, is it Mammy once more? I could just look at a couple of comments there while we're waiting for Mr. Verney to come back. Will was at the Galway game in Parnell. That was obviously 2019. Major difference on the Dubs side is no Conal Keaney. He was an absolute bull that day. Monster of a performance from him. Yeah, both himself and Sutcliffe were brilliant in the half-forward lines that day. Comment in from Mark Tobin. Wexford, all the big guns fired on the day. Need to repeat it next week and through the summer if they're going to do anything. A comment in from Richard Good. Main thing is we're not getting... Richard Good is after coming in with a comment here about yourself, Michael Verney. Good timing to get back in. Main thing is we're not getting sold that Verney lockdown hair pup. I think Wexford have built on that. Not
what
really
does he
sure.
mean exactly?
I don't really know. But keep those comments coming in, whether they're nonsensical or not. We want
you're gonna have to explain that a bit more. I have no problem taking abuse, but I wanted it to make sense. Like I don't get that. I've no problem taking abuse. I'm well used to it. But please,
I think
explain.
he's just happy you've cut your hair. That's the sense I'm getting from that.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on the Wexford Laois game before we finish off on that?
No,
I would say one final thing. They're going for goal at all times. Even we saw it in the Clare game during the league. But even those stick passes across looking for somebody who's right in front of goal. Lee Chin did it for David Dunn. Was it Rory O'Connor did it for the Simon Donoghue goal in that game down in Cusack Park? They are looking for goal. Even Conor McDonald shooting from 25 yards out. Now, Enda Rowland should have said that was poor, but they are going for goal all the time.
Yeah, the intent is definitely there. Just like really, their whole season is going to be defined on what they bring against Kilkenny. If they can beat Kilkenny in Championship again for the third time in 5 years, that'd be huge. And if they do, they're in the Leinster final and at an All-Ireland quarter final at the very, very least. Yeah. But that's going to be interesting. It remains to be seen now.
Yeah, and just a reminder, we're brought to you by OUrgame.com. Use the promo code OUrgame and you'll get 15% off. Just a reminder also that if you want to get the audio podcast, go to patreon.com/OUrgame. It's a $5 a month. Moving on to the Joe McDonagh Cup. Carlow had a big win over Kildare, 222-316. No Marty Kavanagh for Carlow. It'd be a huge loss if he's out for any significant length of time, won't it?
Yeah, just reading between the lines, it seems to be a serious knee injury that he suffered. Like that's a good win for them in his absence. Like
Kildare were flying.
Yeah, no, they were. In fairness, Kildare were flying. But I think in fairness, Chris Nolan kind of stepped up. He's been one of their best forwards anyway. But he stepped up on the frees, hit 6 frees and hit 4 from play. And Kevin MacDonald, who to the best of my knowledge would generally have hurled a bit further back the field, he chipped in with 2-2, and by all accounts that was the difference maker. James Burke hit 2-2 for Kildare as well. I kind of posed the question to you last week: could Kildare do a bit more than survive in the McDonagh? Missing Marty Kavanagh, they would have smelled this as a big opportunity, particularly on home soil. And while they played well, they've probably missed the boat here. Like realistically, they're not going to be in with a shout, been in a final unless they can beat Westmeath and other results go their way. Unless they beat Westmeath and Westmeath beat Carlow and they all end up on the same points and it goes down to score difference. But the big question I have is like, can Carlow win the McDonagh without Marty Kavanagh? Personally, I couldn't see it. I couldn't see how they could.
It's a tough one, but yeah, definitely given the level of opposition in there, that is a seriously tall order.
That's a Cillian O'Connor one, Shane. That's a player that a county just cannot do without. Yeah. But you can lose somebody else, but I just don't know how Carlow can cope without his loss.
Yeah, and it's a big job for Tom Mullally in there in the first season. I mean, people would have been pretty pleased with how things were going under Bonner, and maybe they wanted to kick on that next level again. But yeah, losing him is massive. Like, and we must again commend the job that David Herity is doing with Kildare, because a couple of years ago, I'm not too sure that many people would have seen them competing as well as that at this level. So certainly doing very, very well there. We'll move on to the other fixture in the Joe McDonagh Cup as well. That was Kerry against Down, a 224-121 win for the Kingdom. And I don't know if people saw it on Buff Egan's Snapchats. What a goal from Shane Conway. High ball went in. And he didn't just go up and tip it down. He flicked it on for himself, got onto the ball, and sure, it was obvious enough. It was only going one place, back of the net. Brilliant stuff from Shane Conway. And good win for Kerry, because Down had a decent league,
That's a big win, Shane, in fairness, because I think Down actually finished on the same points as Kerry in the league. But the group they're in, it's Kerry, Down and Meath. This was essentially, to me anyway, this was a semi-final match. The winner of this is going to top the group and they're going to be through to the final. So it looks like Kerry definitely have one foot in the final already. And as we said, if they do win the McDonagh, they end up in the Leinster Championship next year, which would be mad. It'd be mad to see Kerry playing Kilkenny potentially in the Leinster Championship. It'd be something, football aristocrats against hurling aristocrats. But a good win. Conway class again. It's just we're kind of used to that. And in fairness to at least GA Go, I suppose you can see games now. But in fairness to the Buff, I know he's a Clare man, but he loves Kerry hurling. And how many like unbelievable clips.
Man. He's a Kilgarvan man.
Yeah. Well, he's got, the way you can mix the O'Neill's jerseys now, one half Kerry, one half Clare. I think Buff would nearly be mixing them jerseys if he could at this stage. But how many clips has he, offered up to people over the last couple of years that people probably wouldn't have seen otherwise. And that was just an absolute moment of genius from Conway. Yet another moment of genius.
Yeah, Christy Ring Cup. And do you know what occurred to me over the weekend? Obviously, Offaly weren't out over the weekend. Next year, if Laois play Offaly in the Joe McDonagh Cup, if it turns out that Laois lose their relegation playoff against Antrim, I wouldn't back against Offaly beating them.
I tell you what, Shane, and maybe I'm being a bit mad, but I think Offaly would be favourites for the McDonagh if they were in it this year. And I agree. Yeah, and I think they did, like, looking at with a couple of Westmeath injuries, with Marty Cavan out, like, you'd have to say they'd be best player. You would be probably backing them to win the McDonagh. And it's funny, as I said last week on the Thursday show, they played Kildare and beat them fairly comprehensively in a challenge game, albeit it was competitive at different stages. I think Offaly would have a great shout in the McDonagh this year. They're in the ring. It looks like after Wicklow beating Roscommon the other day, Wicklow played Derry, my Derry, in 2 weeks' time, and the winner of that will be through to a semi-final, and they would potentially, I think, avoid Offaly. The winners of that group would avoid Offaly potentially until a final. So, like, the meeting of Wicklow and Roscommon was two teams that had, like, really shocking leagues. There's no point in saying any different. And Roscommon, Wicklow were down to 14 men. Gary Byrne got sent off, and Roscommon couldn't really take advantage. Mikey Lee was brilliant for Wicklow, hit 1-4. But Wicklow and Derry is the big game. I'd still be fancying Derry to come through that and probably top the group. If I'd say it at this stage, I'd probably be looking at a Derry Offaly final. And you'd have to, like, it would beggar belief for anything other than an Offaly win. And without being smart, Shane, like, if Offaly really wanted to make a statement of intent, they could put up massive scores. Like, they could potentially put up a massive score against Sligo. Like, they'd have the capability of hitting, a ridiculous score, something like Tyrone hit against Longford, if they really want to make a statement.
And if they don't win it this year, that will be seen as a massive failure. There's no two ways about it.
A massive failure. It would be. It'd be an unmitigated disaster.
Yeah. And like,
imagine playing Division 1 hurling and potentially playing Christy Ring in the championship. Like, that, like, just would be unheard of. I'm not even going to countenance it at the moment. I can't see it happening.
We'll jump on then to the Nicky Racker Cup. Mayo beat Donegal 2-14 to 17 points. Keith Higgins, former Mayo footballer who obviously loves his hurling, he scored 1-3, including a free and a 65. That was a repeat of last year's Nicky Racker Cup final, and they could go on and meet in the final again here. Laurie Maher, Longford, as we said, put up 825, Louth 319. That is an absolute hammering of the highest order. Yeah, and Louth won the Laurie Maher last year. Laurie Maher only had 3 teams last year, has 5 this year. So Longford and Monaghan are after coming into it. That's a fair statement from Longford. Like, 825 is ridiculous. Reuben Murray, first half hat-trick. David Buckley with 1-4 as well. Like, that's as comprehensive as it gets. As you said, like, imagine a team scoring 319. No more than what Laois put up against Wexford in 123. But, like, if you're conceding, like, if the floodgates are open at the other end, like, what chance have you got, really? But a busy weekend of hurling, and just great to have it back. It's hard, like, it's hard beat it. Yeah, and then next weekend is breakneck again. Like, I mean, so many. I think this season is going to be over in a flash. Like, pretty soon we'll be down to All-Ireland quarterfinals, and then we'll just have 3 or 4 games left. It's almost nearly going too quickly, isn't it? Yeah, we might do a 4-hour show on Thursday just to make sure we get everything in. Okay, let's see. Sylvia here. Tip will be Clare's. They have too much class, and Limerick will be Cork, and then great final with Limerick to win by about 4 points. So we'll see, and we'll certainly talk about those games ahead of the weekend on the Thursday Hurling Show. Michael Verney, thank you very much. And a reminder, we were brought to you by OUrgame and get the audio podcasts on Patreon. Thanks very much, Michael. Cheers, Shane.